My girlfriend cheated on me with my best friend because of her friend who hated me and was trying to get her to break up with me. Walking into the party, everything felt off. My girlfriend, Emily, had been distant all week, but I assumed it was just stress. I wasn't expecting anything unusual until I saw her. She was sitting on my best friend's lap, her arms wrapped around his neck in a way that was way too familiar. Their faces were close, too close. Then, right in front of everyone, she kissed him. I stopped in my tracks, unable to process what I was seeing. Laughter erupted behind me. Emily's best friend, Kayla, was watching, a satisfied smirk on her face. She had never liked me, and now it was clear she had been waiting for this moment. She looked at me with amusement, as if this was something inevitable. Everything suddenly made sense. Emily's cold behavior, her short replies, her sudden interest in spending more time with my best friend. I had ignored the signs, but now they were impossible to deny. Standing there, watching my girlfriend kiss my best friend, I felt like an idiot. Everyone around me had noticed what was happening before I did. Some were whispering, others were laughing. No one looked surprised. Kayla was standing nearby, arms crossed, smirking like she had been waiting for this moment. She was Emily's best friend, and from the very beginning, she had made it clear she didn't like me. She was the kind of person who always had an opinion about everything, especially when it came to Emily's relationships. She was popular, loud, and confident in a way that made people listen to her. And unfortunately for me, Emily listened the most. Emily had been my girlfriend for nearly a year. We met in college, and for a long time, I thought things were good. She was smart, funny, and outgoing, everything I wasn't. I wasn't the kind of guy people immediately noticed. I wasn't the most attractive or the most social, but Emily seemed to like me for who I was. Or at least, that's what I thought. Then there was my best friend, Ryan. We had been close since high school. He was the opposite of me. Tall, athletic, and always the center of attention. Girls liked him. He never had to try. But he was also the kind of guy who always said he had my back. So I never thought he would betray me like this. Kayla had been pushing for Emily to break up with me since day one. She always had something negative to say. If Emily talked about me, Kayla would roll her eyes and say she could do better. If I gave Emily a gift, Kayla would find a way to criticize it. She made it obvious that she thought I wasn't good enough. Now, watching Emily with Ryan, it was clear that Kayla had finally convinced her. And I was the last one to realize it. I met Emily during my second year of college. We were in the same history class, and she was the kind of person who instantly drew attention. She was friendly, always had something interesting to say, and made people feel like they mattered. I wasn't the type to stand out, but for some reason, she noticed me. At first, I thought she was just being nice, but then we started talking outside of class. She laughed at my jokes, texted me first sometimes, and even invited me to study with her. Eventually, I got the courage to ask her out, and to my surprise, she said yes. For a while, everything felt perfect. We spent most of our time together, and she always made me feel like I was important to her. That changed when I met Kayla. Kayla was Emily's best friend from high school, and from the very first moment, I could tell she didn't like me. She was the kind of person who always had something to say, and she wasn't subtle about her opinions. When Emily introduced us, Kayla barely acknowledged me. She never asked me anything about myself, and whenever I tried to join in conversations, she would cut me off or ignore me. At first, I thought maybe she was just protective of Emily, but then the comments started. She made it obvious that she thought Emily could do better. If I showed up to a party wearing something casual, she would make fun of my clothes. If Emily mentioned something nice I did for her, Kayla would point out how bare minimum it was. She made a joke once about how Emily always dated guys who were beneath her. Emily would roll her eyes at her comments, but she never defended me. She would just laugh and brush it off, saying that's just how Kayla was. I told myself it didn't matter, that Kayla's opinion didn't change the way Emily felt about me. But over time, I could feel it starting to get to her. Kayla had money, her family was well off, and she only dated guys who had expensive cars, dressed in designer clothes, and took her on expensive trips. She expected the same for Emily. Whenever Emily talked about our dates, Kayla would compare them to something one of her rich boyfriends had done for her. Emily started making comments about how I should dress better or how we should go to nicer places. She never said it outright, but I knew where it was coming from. Looking back, I should have seen it as a warning sign for a while. I tried to ignore it. Kayla's comments, Emily's subtle changes, the way our relationship started feeling different. It was easier to pretend everything was fine than to admit something was wronged. At first, it was small things. Emily started texting me less and spending more time with Kayla. When we were together, she seemed distracted, like she wasn't fully there. She used to laugh at my dumb jokes, but now she just gave me a small smile before changing the subject. Then came the comparisons. She started mentioning things Kayla's boyfriends did, like how they surprised her with expensive gifts or took her to fancy restaurants. She'd casually say things like, It would be nice to do something like that sometime. I knew what she meant. I wasn't doing enough. Or at least, not enough in a way that Kayla would approve of. Kayla wasn't subtle about it either. If I picked Emily up in my beat-up car, she would make a sarcastic comment about how cute it was. If I planned a date that wasn't expensive enough, she would remind Emily how she deserves to be spoiled. Emily never disagreed. The worst part was that I knew Kayla was trying to get inside Emily's head, and it was working to one point. I told Emily that Kayla clearly had an issue with me. I thought she would understand, but instead, she got defensive. She told me that Kayla was just looking out for her and that I was overreacting. She even made it seem like I was the problem, like I was insecure for no reason. That should have been my second warning sign. I convinced myself that Emily wouldn't let Kayla influence her, but deep down, I knew things were already changing. I just didn't want to admit it. Things kept getting worse, but I still tried to pretend everything was fine. Emily pulled away more and more, but every time I brought it up, she would brush it off. She always had an excuse. She was busy, tired, stressed, but I wasn't stupid. I could tell when someone was losing interest. Then one night, after another awkward date where Emily barely spoke to me, I decided to finally confront her. I asked her if something was wrong, if she still wanted to be with me. She hesitated before saying everything was fine, but I could tell she didn't mean it. The next day, I found out from a friend that Emily had been spending more time with Ryan, my best friend. At first, I didn't want to believe it. Ryan and I had known each other since high school. He was the kind of guy who always had girls around, but he had never gone after someone I was dating. At least, that's what I thought. I asked Emily about it, and she acted like it was nothing. She said Ryan was just a friend, and that Kayla was the one who started inviting him to hang out with them. I should have known that was a lie. Kayla had been waiting for this moment. She had spent months making sure Emily thought I wasn't good enough, and now she had set her up with someone she thought was. That night, Emily told me she needed time to think about our relationship. She didn't even sound sad about it. She just said she wasn't sure if we should be together anymore. The next time I saw her, she was with Ryan. After Emily told me she needed time to think, I tried to give her space. I didn't text her as much, didn't ask to hang out, I just waited. But deep down, I already knew what was coming. A couple of days passed, and Emily barely spoke to me. She used to text me all the time, even just to tell me about her day. Now, she either left me on read or responded with short, dry messages. I told myself that maybe she really was just thinking things over. Maybe she was feeling stressed. Maybe she just needed a little time. But then a friend of mine, someone who didn't even know we were having problems, told me they had seen Emily with Ryan. They had gone to a bar together with a group of people, and apparently, they had been acting way too close. When I asked for details, my friend hesitated, like he didn't want to be the one to tell me. But eventually, he admitted that they had been sitting together all night, whispering, laughing, touching. I tried to convince myself it didn't mean anything. Ryan had always been a flirty guy, and maybe Emily was just leaning on him because we were going through a rough patch. But something about it felt off. That weekend, I decided to go to a party some mutual friends were throwing. I wasn't even planning on seeing Emily. I just needed to get out of my head for a bit. I walked in, grabbed a drink, and tried to act normal. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. Emily was sitting on Ryan's lap. I froze. At first, I thought maybe I was seeing things wrong. But no. Her arms were wrapped around his neck, her body leaning into him like they had been together for years. Their faces were close, too close, and before I could even process what I was looking at, she kissed him. It wasn't an awkward, hesitant kiss. It wasn't something that looked like a mistake. She kissed him like she meant it, like she had wanted to do it for a long time. The worst part? No one looked surprised. A few people turned to watch my reaction, but it wasn't shock on their faces, it was pity. It was like they had been expecting this to happen, like I was the last person in the room to find out. Then I noticed Kayla standing nearby. She was watching me, arms crossed, a smirk forming at the corner of her mouth. She didn't even pretend to look guilty or surprised. She had been waiting for this moment, and now that it had finally happened, she looked satisfied. Kayla had spent months telling Emily I wasn't good enough. She had done everything she could to plant doubts in her head. And now, after all that work, she had finally succeeded in replacing me. Not just with anyone, but with my best friend. I stood there, waiting for some kind of reaction from Emily, some kind of guilt. But she never even looked in my direction. She just kept talking to Ryan like nothing had happened. Like I had never even existed. I felt stupid. I had spent so much time worrying about what Emily was thinking, trying to fix things, trying to be better. And all along, she had already moved on. Not just emotionally, but physically. I left without saying a word. There was no point in staying. The people who were supposed to care about me had already made their choice. That night, Emily texted me. She didn't apologize. She didn't even try to explain. All she said was that she didn't think we were right for each other anymore. Like this had been some random realization she had come to. Like Kayla hadn't been whispering in her ear the entire time. Like she hadn't been setting this up from the start. And Ryan? He never even reached out after that night. I didn't bother trying to talk to Emily or Ryan. What was the point? They had already made their decision, and I wasn't going to beg for an explanation I already knew. But the more I thought about it, the more something felt off. This didn't just happen overnight. Emily had been pulling away for months, and Ryan, who had always been my best friend, had somehow slid into her life so easily. It wasn't just betrayal. It felt planned. I wasn't the only one who thought so. A few days later, another friend, someone who had been at the party, texted me, saying they had to tell me something. We met up in person, and what he said confirmed everything I had feared. Kayla had been pushing Emily and Ryan together for weeks, maybe even months. She had been inviting Ryan to their hangouts, talking about how great he was, and constantly comparing him to me. She made sure Emily saw him as the better option. Funnier, more confident, more attractive. And it worked. Emily started spending more time with him, little by little, until eventually, she was confiding in him more than she was confiding in me. But the worst part? Ryan wasn't just some random choice Emily made. Kayla had been the one who suggested it. Kayla had always hated me, and when Emily didn't dump me on her own, she took things into her own hands. She pushed Emily into Ryan's arms, feeding her doubts about me until she finally gave in. It wasn't just a natural breakup. It was manipulation. And Ryan? He went along with it. He never once told me what was going on. He never gave me a warning. Instead, he played along, knowing full well what he was doing behind my back. Emily didn't just cheat on me. She was led into it, pushed into believing I wasn't good enough until she finally acted on it. I didn't know what hurt more. The fact that she had betrayed me, or the fact that she let someone else decide it for her. Now that I know the full story, I don't know how to feel. I don't even know if I'm more hurt or angry. Emily didn't just cheat. She let herself be manipulated into it. Ryan didn't just betray me. He sat there, knowing what was happening, and still went along with it. And Kayla? She got exactly what she wanted. The worst part is, I don't think any of them feel bad about it. Emily hasn't reached out since she sent that pathetic text ending things. Ryan hasn't said a word to me. Kayla, I'm sure, is feeling pretty damn proud of herself. I keep wondering if there was something I could have done differently. Should I have spoken up more when I noticed Emily pulling away? Should I have confronted Kayla earlier? Would it have even made a difference? At this point, I don't think I'll ever get the answers I want. But one thing is clear. I wasted so much time trying to be good enough for Emily, when in the end, she let someone else decide I wasn't. So what now? Do I call them out? Do I just move on and let them deal with the mess they created? I feel like I should do something, but at the same time, I know nothing I say will change what happened. I never thought I'd lose my girlfriend and my best friend at the same time. But here I am. So, Reddit. What would you do?